Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator, bringing you the podcast series, How Did I Get Here? A series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas, or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone, that everybody starts somewhere and everybody goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. So today I'm very excited to be interviewing Molly Vaile, who is the CEO and founder of Her Life. How fun is that? And I can't wait till we dive into what that looks like. And I met Molly. Welcome, Molly. First, I should welcome you.
Thank you, Kathy. So good to be with you.
And Molly and I met through this women's leadership book club that I've been interviewing so many of the women from, because it's just, I've been fascinated by how we got connected through the book club in such a interesting way, but then also such interesting people and interesting industries. So anyway, I'm very excited to hear more about her story today. So, and Molly, before we talk about what it means to be the CEO and founder of Your Life, I always like to start with the icebreaker questions. So tell us, if you would, what part of the country, or I guess world, you grew up in, and a little bit about your family dynamics, how many siblings, birth order, that kind of thing, and how you think maybe both those things shaped you.
Oh, sure. Well, thank you again for having me, Kathy. It's so much fun to get to do this with you outside of book club. So I am originally from Chicago, and I grew up downtown. I grew up in the neighborhood known as Lincoln Park, and I am the youngest of three. And we are all 16 months apart. So I have an older sister. Katie is the oldest, and then my brother Ryan is in the middle, and then I'm the baby. However, even Ryan and Katie would say I am the oldest youngest.
That's funny. So you're more like the oldest than you are. Oh, very cool. Okay, well, yeah. How did that happen?
I think I am a sensitive striver. I am very much an empath. While coupled with really love to get stuff done. And so when you combine those two things, Katie and Ryan, they'll laugh if they listen to this, but my sister Katie is like an incredible literary genius. And she can tell you just incredible points in history and all those types of things. My brother is like the mayor. He's the very social one of all of us. And then there's me, who is the most organized. And I've always been organized. When I was a little kid, we'd play school and we'd play, grocery store, all the different things that we would play. But I always wanted to be, which was referred to at the time as the secretary. I just always wanted to be the person that was organizing everything or running the cash register. So, and my sister and brother are much more creative than I am. And so, they would have the creative fun things, and I would just keep us all organized and on task and moving forward. And yeah, so it's just always been part of me since I was a little person.
Wow, that's so cool. I have not had anyone describe that before. I did have someone, though, now that I think about it. She was the seventh of eight, and she has a lot of the oldest tendencies. But that's so cute to be that you're the oldest youngest, or the youngest oldest, or however you said that.
Both. It's transferable. You can say it in both directions, but it's pretty clear. You get it fast.
Yeah. So there's the birth order, but then there's also just something about DNA, right? That you inherit those different traits and then bring them about. So very cool. So what other kind of activities growing up? Was sports, music, theater? What did you do as a young person?
Yeah. So I'm the sports person. My sister is the music and the theater. She's more of a thespian. And so for me, sports I was very lucky. We grew up in downtown Chicago, as I said, and in the summers we had a lake house in Wisconsin. And so from Memorial Day to Labor Day as kids, we moved to Wisconsin. And so I had, the opportunity to be a lake person, which if anyone who listens is a lake person, you get it. It's a very, very fortunate way to grow up. And so at that life, it was much more golf and tennis and that sort of thing. But from a sports perspective, I played soccer and I played in college as well. And I actually did not make our high school soccer team. We were the first women's soccer team for our high school, and I didn't make it. And then went to college and was able to join the team there. So, I think the thing I think about being an athlete does tie to what we talked about earlier, which is, a dedication. And there's purpose tied into that as well, and teamwork and knowing how to work together and be and achieve success as a group rather than solely, which is very different to my career now. It's I am a sole entrepreneur, so I am very much in charge of my own show, which is also by design now at this stage in my life.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm I shouldn't say former, because I'm still am an athlete and various teams, and I realize how important teams are to me. And when I became a solopreneur, then I was like, where's my team? Where's my tribe? Where are my people? And it's been increasingly, that's been really hard, because when I was in corporate, you have these teams, right? And you find that you can, you find these high performing teams again, which I crave. And then I get out on my own, like, wow, I need a team. So
yeah, I totally relate to you, Kathy. It's when I work with clients, I actually really look at who's the team. Number one, I look at who's the leader, and what is sort of that ethos of the leader. And then number two, I look at the team, and I'm like, okay, are these people that I want to spend my time with? Because I miss working with people, but I get the dose through clients.
Yeah. Same here. You get, I find ways like through our book club and through Colorado Thought Leaders Forum. I found my tribe and my people. So, okay. Well, we're going to shift gears a little bit. Introvert, extrovert, or ambivert?
I am an ambivert. So I am 52% extrovert, 48% introvert. And it's 100% accurate. I mean, you know me, and I'm generally a very social person, yet I take that my recharge is important to me, and that solo time is also really important to me.
Yeah.
So, yep, I'm an ambivert.
So how are you so accurate with your percentage on that? Is there a particular
There was
test?
a test.
Okay. I always knew I was in the middle, but I didn't really have a percentage on that. So
yeah, at some point for a different client, they asked me to take that test, and which I was fine. I was very happy to do. I was like, oh, this would be fascinating. And that was the outcome.
That was the outcome. Okay. So on the fun meter scale of 1 to 5, 1 being couch potato and 5 being life of the party, where do you put yourself?
I'm going to say a 4. It's rare that I'm the life of the party, but I'm certainly contributing to the vibe of the party.
Of the party. Yeah, that's when your extrovertness all comes out, right? And when and where, I'm there.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Okay, on the risk meter, same scale, 1 to 5. 1 being low risk taker, 5 being high risk taker. Where do you put yourself?
I would, if I can use a 4.5, I'd go with a 4.5. And I say that because, as is very prominent in your podcast, transitions. I have lived all over the world, and I have done a lot of those moves without knowing anyone, or knowing a couple of people, but not necessarily having a tribe upon which I'm landing. And then it's funny that I omitted, from a sports perspective, I'm also a cyclist and a skier. And from a skiing perspective, there are certainly skiers that take far bigger risks, and I'm not a cliff jumping type of skier. So that's why I'm like, I can't be a 5. But I was, skiing in the backcountry, and snowcat skiing is truly some of my most favorite time. At 40, so I'm 44 now, at 40, I was like, I'm going to go heli skiing. And I didn't chicken out. It's not fair to say I chickened out, but I started to really get deeper into backcountry skiing. And it's still on my bucket list. A heli ski trip is still on my bucket list.
Okay, so it's something that you rethought from a risk perspective, but it's still there. It's niggling at you, right? It's like, oh, I still want to do this. So, okay, very cool.
That's it. Yes, correct.
Well, Molly, before we get into how did I get here, tell us where here is, right? So you're the CEO and founder of Your Life. which actually you have a business. So tell us about your business and what you do today, and explain that for us. And then we'll get into how did I get here?
Okay. They are very much tied together. So I'll try to keep it focused on what I do first. So I live in Denver, Colorado. I moved to Denver in February 4th of 2020. So from a dating perspective, date and time perspective, it was about 6 weeks before Denver shut down for the coronavirus pandemic. And so we'll pause. We can get into that later. But Denver, Colorado, and my business is a strategic growth, accelerated growth strategist. So I work with companies to help them think through how to grow, and whether it's growing or scaling or deepening existing relationships through experiences. It's all about, helping another company achieve what is the next phase in their life cycle.
Wow. Well, that sounds fascinating. And I'm interested then on how you got here, because you usually don't start there in a career, but it's somewhere you end up because you have a certain set of skills and expertise and experience. So I guess let's start with then. When you were in junior high school, did you say, "Oh, I want to be an accelerated strategy growth consultant"? Or what did you want to be?
Yeah. No, I didn't. Let's see. That's funny. When I think back to that time, I wanted to be either an architect or a lawyer. And I think there's some interesting points in that. But generally speaking, I can remember it was because they made a lot of money in my perception. Oh. And so, that's where I started. But if you look at the commonality of, lawyer and architect, there's a rigidity to it. There's a process, there's a procedure. And that is very much the undercurrent of what I do. It's, helping organizations streamline their process and procedure such that there's more time efficiency.
Okay. So when you were in junior high school, what did you decide for college, and what were your strengths? I mean, did you actually pursue an architectural or lawyer?
No. So college, I applied to 11 schools from Vermont to Colorado, and got into both of those schools and ruled them out because I knew I would ski more than I would go to school. Oh. I was a very wise 18-year-old.
You knew yourself well. You're like, oh, I got to remove the distractions.
Yeah. So instead, I ended up going to college at Drake University, which is in Des Moines, Iowa. So I removed all potential obstacles and found myself in the middle of Iowa, and couldn't be more grateful for that experience. There's about 15 of us who are still incredibly close women, and we refer to ourselves as the Lady Tribe. And it sounds dramatic to say without each other, but without each other, we wouldn't be the women we are today. We push each other, we pull each other up, we hug each other closely. And yes, I'm very, very fortunate for my college experience. And I think to answer your other question of what did I study in school, my mom said to me, "You're going to study public relations." And I was like, "Okay, sounds good." And
which was neither of the two things you said you wanted to do.
Nope, not at all. She was like, "I think there's I'm very grateful to my mom because she did identify a trend that was emerging in '95 that people needed, more formalized public relations. And so, yes, I studied PR with marketing and management as my, what do we call that? I can't remember, like your secondary focus, marketing and management. And it was truly exactly right. I use all of those 3 degrees to this day, which I also think is unique. I don't think everyone uses their actual degree. But I flow through PR, marketing, and management in my everyday.
Well, and I love that. So your mom said you were going to do that, and then you just did it. A lot of young people are like, "Oh, whatever mom and dad want, not what I'm going to do." Right? It's the opposite. In your case, you followed their advice. I will say that I've kind of been. I try not to give any advice on this in my podcast, but I do think getting a degree, like a business degree, you can't go wrong with that, right? And I guess I say the same thing about marketing or PR. There's something communicate. There's, I guess, a lot of degrees that you can use that are just going to help you in life. But then it also creates a career.
Yeah.
Some of them also can help in life, but maybe it's not as obvious with the career. Like a psychology degree can help you in life, right? But then some people are like, well, do I go into mental health? Do I go into counseling? But then sometimes they end up in business or investment planning. It's been interesting to see how people use their degrees. So you use all three of yours.
I do. And my quick funny story for you is my dad wanted me to get a business degree. And
Oh,
so I did have good advice on both sides. And at the time I was more trusting of my mother's advice than my father's advice. But I still say if I had gotten a business degree, I'd be in a great place. So I was well advised.
well advised. Okay. So you get that degree, and then how do you get those first jobs?
So when I finished college, actually, I applied for AmeriCorps. Are you familiar with AmeriCorps?
A little bit.
The division I was in was called the National Civilian Community Corps, which is often commonly referred to as the Domestic Peace Corps. So it's a government-led program where you apply to be accepted into the program. And we did a variety of service projects. I was based in the Southeast with a team of 13 people whom we lived and traveled with. And, as you look at first as a transition, why did I choose that? Why did I choose to do service right after college? And I went to a Jesuit high school in Chicago where the mantra is service for others. And I had a great time in college, and I did not give back to my community during that time. Maybe a few things, but not in the most meaningful way. And so it was a very natural, and I would say privileged choice to make, in that I was finishing college without debt and the ability to live off the stipend that was coming from AmeriCorps and contribute to the greater good of America. And to this day, that's another group of people that I'm very, I would say we rekindled our friendship. That's really hard to live and travel with 13 people, ages 18 to 24, and do everything from your laundry to your meals to scheduling to there's a lot of coordination that gets involved in that, and that can get tense as well. So we've rebirthed those relationships over the last few years, and I'm grateful for that experience as well.
Wow. It's almost like a family. You become a family, right? Because of how close you are in doing all those life functions. And yet you don't know each other. Wow. And then there's the stress of not have, like you said, the stipend, and how do you live off of that, and how do you give service, and all. Wow. But I can also see how that would get you so close, because you're in this shared experience, and you guys are surviving and thriving together and relying on each other. So wow. So great opportunity about working and living and being around people.
Exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right. It's not your family of origin, but it's your family of creation very quickly. And so, like any family, to live and work together for a year, yes, we disagreed. And so grateful that has, yes, come full circle and back together. And then when I finished AmeriCorps, it was almost 1 year of service. I said, that's it. It's time. I'm going west. I'm going to live and ski. And so fortunately, I selected Park City, Utah as the town that I wanted to live in. After visiting a handful, I was like, nope, you know what? I want to go to Park City. And I wanted to, at the time, be a server for the season. And I was moving there, I think in October, I can't remember, but be a server for the season and then roll into a career. And the Olympics were coming to Salt Lake. So this is 2000, and in 2002, the Olympics would be there. So I knew there was also industry that I could potentially work in. And about 4 weeks before I moved, a good family friend called, whose daughter had just finished skiing and living in Jackson Hole for the last few years and serving. And I will always thank Kent Fuller, because he said to me, Molly, listen to me, you're not going to ski, you're going to work. And he was one of my dad's former business partners and a very good family friend. And I was like, okay, all right, all right. And he started me in my career working with the Olympics. So I started working for the Olympics about 6 weeks after getting to Park City. I had about, I don't know, 4 weeks as a server. In my whole life, I've only spent 4 weeks as in a service position. But you'll never forget it. And you always take care of servers because it's a really hard job. And that's what then launched me into what it has been my career, started by working with the Olympics.
So what did you do in that first job? Where is it, you said where you're using your PR and your degrees and
So the role was, we were an Olympic hospitality sponsor. So that means if you are a sponsor of the Olympics and you want to entertain guests at the Olympics, this would be the program, the company that you would work with. If you were a non-sponsor, this would also give you access to tickets and accommodations and things that you wouldn't normally have access to as a non-sponsor of the Olympics. So yes, I did get to use my career. I did everything for the company in my early days, from hiring our 200 games time staff to taking clients on site inspections to then running my own programs. It was a small company when I started. There were 12 of us, and I am very fortunate for that because the founder of that company was very much a father figure to me and taught me a lot in my very first job because we were small, yet we hosted over 10,000, I think it was actually 20,000 guests during the Salt Lake Olympics. So that was a huge undertaking for a company that starts very small and then expands for the games then.
wow. You don't think about all the different behind the scenes businesses and activities that happen around the Olympics, right? Because you just see on TV, you just see the events and the athletes, and you don't even think about the sponsors and how they're hosting. And wow,
Yeah,
and
yeah, no,
coordination and management and logistics and all that.
That is where I started in. Lots of people will refer to me as like an event planner. However, as I continued through my career, it's very much operations, logistics, and marketing. And then you throw the PR in there as well. So again, it's management, marketing, and PR. That has really been the root of my career.
Wow. So it sounds like, so a family friend kind of recruited you in, but then there was another leader that really mentored and, took you and molded you. And I'm guessing because of your skills and your work ethic and all of that, then, just kept giving you more to do, right?
I would say there's a blessing and a curse in that. Exactly. Because of my work ethic, I'm and also my way of being, there is a natural leader in me, and then there is the desire to continue to get things done, so to excel and to be surrounded by highly competent people and moving the ball forward. So there's a blessing and a curse in that, oh great, we know if we hand this project to Molly, it's going to get done. And again, as I progressed in my career, starting to take note of where am I giving more than I'm receiving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I can keep so after the Salt Lake Olympics, there was an opportunity we shut down all of the operations in Salt Lake and Park City, and the company wanted me to move to their headquarters, which is in Far Hills, New Jersey, which is about an hour outside of Manhattan on a non-easy train schedule. And I would have needed a car and living. I'm a huge believer in live in the place that you want to live and then commute to your office, but keep that commute as short as possible. So that also would limit my job prospects because I wanted to live and work close together, but it always worked out. So when I decided to not stay with the Olympic organization and instead decided to take an opportunity working with the US Ski and Snowboard Team Foundation, planning events, fundraising for the athletes. And so that kept me based in Park City, Utah. However, the big transition point for me that I always say to people as they're thinking through what changes to make in their lives is, again, it's based on my quality of life. So where was my quality of life change going to be the best? And moving to the East Coast, and that just it didn't in my gut feel like the right decision, and rather taking a risk and saying, based in Park City, not knowing exactly what I was going to do next, and then US ski team opportunity unfolded, and that's also where I say I got my MBA, because I worked very closely with our board of trustees, which is an incredible board of trustees, very bright men and women who taught me a ton. I mean, I think I was 23 years old and we were at a board meeting, and one of the heads of, or one of the trustee members, who's considered a father of venture capital, said to me, Molly, I need a P&L on all of the events by tomorrow morning. I looked at him and I was like, absolutely, no problem. I am like 23 at the time. I have no idea what a P&L is. And so I turned to my boss and I was like, Tom needs a P&L by the morning, and I don't know what that is. And she was like, but did you tell him you don't know? And I was like, absolutely not. I know better to tell than to, divulge that I don't know what that is. So again, they really taught me the connection between experiences and the bottom line. So lots of people throw events thinking that it will drive their business, but you really need to have a strategy around what is it that you're doing, why are you doing it, and what do you intend for the business outcome to be. And that I learned while working at the US Ski and Snowboard Team Foundation.
Well, and when you say it's a foundation, so was it giving money, was it philanthropic and it was giving money to other organizations, or what does that mean, foundation? That
Yeah,
I was part of a foundation, and that's not what we did, but we just called it that. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's one of the most surprising things that most Americans don't know, but our athletes that we send to the Olympics are not government funded. They are funded by the US Olympic and Paralympic Foundation, as well as then what's referred to as NGBs, national governing bodies, which the US Ski and Snowboard Team Foundation is an NGB. And they also do fundraising to support the success of their athletes.
Oh, I see. So each sport then has its own foundation. And then
depending on the size, yeah.
Okay, so that's how you were raising money for it. So then it was for the Olympic athletes for ski and snowboard. Okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah. So how long? So you decided to leave the bigger Olympic organization. How long, were you in that state of transition or flux before you got your next thing? I mean, that's always the hard part, right? Is that how do you have faith and how do you hang on in between?
Yeah, I'm so glad you went back to that, because I had this moment of like, should I tell this part of the story? So in between working for the Olympic company that was called Jet Set Sports and US Ski and Snowboard Team, I think I had probably 4, if not 5 months of transition between. And I went to work for one of the hotels that we had worked with for the Olympics as a concierge, and I was a dog walker. And between those two things, that is how I sustained myself between jobs. And I think it's important to highlight, because I can tell you all of these transitions, I'll have a little job function like that. And they all have contributed to who I am, as well as I am a big believer in don't be above anything. So, as I continue in my career, I've run companies and, done some really cool stuff. However, you just have to have the humility and lack of ego, or maybe just awareness of your ego, to know that it's okay to do things that aren't necessarily ironclad part of what you see as your career, because it's all going to contribute in one way or another. And again, it goes back to what was my quality of life. I had a great quality of life. I mean, listen, I was a concierge at a bougie, fabulous luxury hotel in Park City, and I was walking dogs on the mountain, hiking every day. And I paid the bills, waiting until I could figure out what my next spot was going to be in my career.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I love that humility thing, because that's, sometimes we get so caught up in, well, your career needs to be up and to the right. The next thing needs to be that next, externally seems like the right fit and, the right level of responsibility and all that. There's all the shoulds, right? You end up shoulding shooting on yourself, but sometimes you just have to say, well, I'm going to do this right now until that thing comes about. And you don't know when that other thing's going to come about. That's the interesting part, is you never know. And so
That's right.
you've got to be in that space of uncertainty, but what do you do in the meantime? And you found things that works with your quality of life. So awesome. Okay. So then you're with the Ski and Snowboard Foundation. How does that play out then?
So I stay with the foundation for 2 years, 2.5 years. So I get to almost the end of 2004. And at the time I was dating an Australian, and he was not able to stay in the US any longer. And so I took an opportunity to go back to the Olympics, moved to Athens, and worked on the Athens Olympics for my old company, Jet Set Sports. And with that, what my objective there was I could make a good amount of money in a short period of time working on the game. So my objective was make some money so that you've got a cushion to move to Australia with. And then while I was in Australia, I tended to work on our Australian-based clients. And I said to the CEO and founder, whom, if we toggle back, was a mentor and father figure to me. And I said, Sid, what do you think about me opening an office for us in Sydney? We have a really strong client base in Australia, and I can help us grow our international presence. And he looked at me and said, great, do it. I'm just not sponsoring you. And I said, okay. And so my risk there is moving to Australia with a man that I had dated for 2.5 years. And I didn't have a visa. I moved over there on a visitor's visa, and then very quickly applied for what we would know as a common law marriage visa, which is a shorter time period in Australia. And it was a huge investment to make. I'll never forget, one of my best friend's husbands in Chicago, who's very practical, looked at me and he was like, hang on, you have just sold your entire life in Park City, literally down to your fork. You own nothing at this moment. And you are moving to Australia with no job, no visa. Like, he just kind of went through the list, and I was like, yeah, you got it. That's me. I'm off.
And that didn't scare you the way he put it like that? Sometimes, when someone recaps it in such a high risk way, right? You're like, oh, I hadn't looked at it like that. Now I'm really freaked out. And you're like, no, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
Well, I'd say he definitely made an impression, because that's almost, what is it? Let's see, 16, 17 years ago. And I still remember
what he said.
So it certainly got me thinking. But again, it was that moment of, I will keep using the word privilege, because I didn't have debt. And it was an opportunity that I could take to go live internationally. And I really do believe and live life as an adventure. And my quality of life was going to be great living in Sydney, Australia.
Okay, so I'm going to up your risk factor. Yeah, I don't think the 4.5 is. That's not good. I'm going to put you more like a 9.5. So I do have. You said that the mentor said that he wouldn't sponsor you. Does that mean like with the visa, or
exactly?
But
yeah.
He did allow. But from the business perspective, you were opening a division for them. So you were sponsored from a kind of a business headquarters perspective, but just not from a visa citizen perspective.
Yes, it gets a little complicated, but I was the person who I was on all of the documents establishing the company, incorporating the company in Australia.
Okay, but with their information, it was still part of that company though, right? And okay, so you had a paycheck, you were funded in that way, but you still had to then deliver, right? And you had to serve the clients that were there and grow the business and everything. So I'm not making light of that. I'm just also wanting to make sure that you weren't, when he said, I'm not going to sponsor you, that didn't mean you had to totally start from scratch.
No, it's just I'm being cagey for no reason. I worked with KPMG and spent over $10,000 to get my visa. So that's the part that he was saying, I'm not going to sponsor you I'm not going to underwrite the fee, nor I want an Australian resident running my company. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he didn't want an American. And so I was paid in Aussie, and all of those things had to roll through. he didn't want to have an expat working for him in Australia. Does that make sense? Am I explaining it?
Yeah. Okay,
Yep.
I get it now. So
Mhm.
there's some other dynamics going there, but still, I mean, it's still high risk what you were doing.
It was high risk.
Yeah, and that
was.
this is
Yeah.
your idea, and you're, oh yeah, this will work.
Yeah.
And so where did you dig the confidence to do this out of? Where was that? Where did that come from? Because what age were you? Did you say?
I was, let's see, 2004 for 2026. Yeah, 26, 27, somewhere around there. I don't know, Kathy. I wish I could, give that nugget of knowledge to your listeners. I really do believe in listen to yourself. And I knew there was a risk. It was so upsetting to my family. They did not necessarily, they were not as in love with the man that I was dating as I was. And they were so afraid that I wouldn't come back to the US after living in Australia, and what a change that would be for everyone in my family. And for me, it was, this is an incredible opportunity to get to go live in Australia with a man that I loved very much at the time. And it was just one of those, I don't know what could go wrong. I guess a lot could go wrong.
Yeah.
But I will say, throughout the, my family not wanting me to make this move, they have always been supportive, no matter, and I've never gotten the "I told you so," even though there's many, many times in my life they could say that to me. Nope, it's always just been okay. There's a great quote that I won't remember exactly, but something about, we give you the wings to know how to come home again, to fly away and fly back.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you need
I'll
the
find
wings.
it for you in a minute. Yeah,
You need the wings, right? Because how else are you going to live life and learn and take a journey of your own? And wow, that's cool. I like that. Like that a lot. So, wow. Okay. So now you're in Australia. And you're still, well, we only have, gosh, like 10 or 15 minutes to get the rest of this year. Oh my gosh.
Okay. We'll get there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So what happens next? Was it wildly successful? The
business was wildly successful. Yep. And it still exists. It's the only international arm of the business today. And from a business perspective, again, it was a great opportunity for me because we looked at M&A. We looked at, should we acquire another company that's Australian based, because Australians like to work with Australians. And what we came to was we didn't acquire any of the other businesses because the product we had was superior. And with that, we were working on pulling those people, unfortunately, from the other companies, but it worked. And I incorporated our office there, grew our client base, and established a true office for us. Actually, that was the last thing I was doing before I moved, because in my time there, nearly 3 years, I'd worked from home or in the offices of the other companies that we were potentially going to acquire. And so, again, I said this to you, Kathy, before we started, but often I think of myself as a Swiss Army knife, because this is so many different facets of things that you're looking at, from, learning how to grow a business in a foreign country, how to incorporate a business in a foreign country, to then the Olympics itself is international. So at this time, we're working on the Olympics in Torino, Italy in 2006 and Beijing, China in 2008. So it's a very multifaceted opportunity.
Wow. Well, and you mentioned your PR marketing degree, but where was business leadership? Where did that come into play? And you're 26.
Yeah. My whole family is entrepreneurs, and as we both know, if you look at your family legacy and life before, it often plays out. And so there's no surprise that I'm an entrepreneur now at this point in my own life. But I think, one of the things I know about being an entrepreneur is it does take a lot of grit and a lot of tenacity. And my dad was more of the grit tenacity person in our lives, and my mom was the fun and the love. They filled different roles. So in a lot of this, it is my dad. It's my dad coming through in me of we had a lot of chores as kids. And, as a kid, you always tried to figure out like how quickly you could get the chore done so you could go do something fun. And so I would cut the corners on the chores. And my dad would pull me back and say, like, listen, do it once or do it twice. But if you do it once, you're probably going to do it in less time than if you have to do it twice. So there's just, some of those little life lessons that have always carried me through.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you got the DNA of the oldest, even though you were the youngest, and then you got the DNA of the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Because even though you're working for a large organization, it seemed like what you did down in Australia, very entrepreneurial. I mean,
Very.
suggesting it, taking the lead on it, setting it up and figuring it out. I mean, super entrepreneurial versus I'm a vice president of a division and this is how we expand into other countries. And there's a model already established. That wasn't you. You were like proposed it and went and did it. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So how long in Australia then? Because obviously you're in Denver. So
yeah. So almost 3 years in Australia. And the end of my time in Australia was actually tied to the end of my relationship. So the man that I was dating, we dated for 5 years. And when that was over, I called the company. And I will say, this might be interesting for your listeners, but every time I have resigned from a company, I have cried. And there isn't a single time, they say never cry at work, whatever. I mean, I understand it. And then there's reality of I get personally very tied to the organizations and the people which I work with. And so each and every time, I remember the very first time I resigned in 2002 from the Olympic company, the woman that I was resigning to was like, "Oh, you're so upset. I actually think you should just think about this and call me back." And I was like, "No, Maria, it's the right decision. It's just a hard decision." And so I that has also been a theme in my life. The right decision is not always the easy one. It's quite often the hard decision. And so the end of our relationship was a very difficult decision. And the moving back to the US was actually an easy decision, even though I didn't want to. I loved my life in Sydney. It's just too far. And the company, again, Jet Set Sports, was fabulous to me. And I called and said, "Listen, this has ended." And of course, I'm tearful. And they were like, "Molly, you just take care of yourself. You do what you need to do to take care of yourself, and we'll sort out the company." And so I moved back to the US, and there was my entire family greeting me at the airport and, holding me up in a time that, again, I'll get emotional about because that was a very difficult life decision. And so now we're in 2007 and I'm living in Chicago, and it's right around the holidays that I'm back, and I'm at a party with friends, and this is funny. A girlfriend said to me, "How are you doing, Molly?" And I looked at her and I was like, "You know what, Lizzie, we're lucky I have clean underwear on." I mean, it was a low point in my life. I barely got off the couch. It was a hard time. And so my mom looked at me and said, "You need to work." The same thing. And she was in a real estate firm and someone needed a scheduler. And so I joined and was a scheduler for a real estate firm for about 6 months. And then an opportunity with JP Morgan to work in their private bank running events for clients came about. And I worked at JP Morgan in the private bank for 11 years. So, that full circle moment of striving, as you referred to earlier, striving for titles, striving for raises, striving for promotions. And I'm very proud of my 11-year career at JP Morgan in the private bank. And I finished as our second highest title. So managing director is our highest title, and then there's executive director. And I was a vice president before that. And so it was an incredible experience to work for JP Morgan for 11 years. And I know we don't have much time, and people always find my career at JP Morgan fascinating, but in brief, it is about it's a culmination of a lot of the pieces of my career, in that business is not done at the boardroom table. Some papers are signed, but relationships are built, in my opinion, often outside of the boardroom and through experiences and through memories. And so that was really my role, was, working with the bankers to say, what are your clients talking to you about, and how can we bring them that expertise? And then finding a thought leader to put in front of them and have host that conversation. And we would do it in small ways, we do it in large ways, but it was an incredible acumen to gain. And I was also very fortunate working at all the high levels with our CEO, and I've learned a ton.
Wow. So it sounds like you had a lot of autonomy on what to create these experiences.
Yeah, I would say a yes and no to that, right? Like you're at JP Morgan,
Yeah.
so it's got to fit.
Yeah.
It's got to fit the box in some way. But at the same time, we were encouraged to really find, like we were doing conversations in cryptocurrency. Oh gosh, now I want to say it was at least 10 years ago, which would have been an edgy thing to do 10 years ago. And now they would be normal.
Yeah.
So
now it's expected. Yeah. And then, but back then, what's cryptocurrency and why do we need to be talking about this? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then it was time for me to move on from the firm. There's a lot to that story, but what I will say in terms of transition is I had sort of, it's not fair to say I'd done it all there, but I'm being cagey again. I was not supported by my leadership to continue to grow. I sort of got a scarlet letter working there, in that in 2008, I took a leave of absence and went to work on the Beijing Olympics. And I don't think I was really ever forgiven for that. It was, 2008, 09, financial crisis was all unfolding while I was in Beijing. People thought there was some sort of dirty deal involved. It became a real mark on my career rather than a positive. And if you follow the timeline, that's about a year and a half into my career working for the firm. So after 11 years, it was about at year 8 that I knew it was time to go. And it's hard to leave an organization that you've been with for that length of time. There are certainly the golden handcuffs of salary and bonus and stock and, all of the different things.
Yeah.
But I knew it was really an ethical decision, Kathy. Like I knew that I was not true to who I am working there at that time, at that level. When you get to the higher levels in these big corporations, you see things that you can't unsee. And I started to do things. I had terminated 2 women from my team and did it in a way that still keeps me up at night. It was not true and honest to me, but it was the way the corporation wanted me to get it done. And so that was when I really knew it was time to go.
Yeah.
But it took me 3 years to make that change, and lots of conversations and honesty with my management. Looked inside the firm, looked outside the firm. And then I was approached by a serial entrepreneur whose name is Brad Keywell. Brad is the co-founder of Groupon, and he's also an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year. He's an incredible man, and he was opening an experiential immersive art museum in Chicago and needed an operator, needed to insert someone to actually bring the whole thing together. And so within 48 hours of my first conversation with him, I signed and resigned from my 11-year career at JP Morgan. So again, high on the risk factor, to do an immersive pop-up museum that we just didn't know if it was going to be successful.
Wow.
And so at that time,
how did he find you?
His chief of staff and I were sitting, catching up and having coffee. And to be fair, I was really picking her brain. We were doing 2 things. One, talking about being senior women in business and how do you bring up other women to the, accelerated levels. And then secondarily, I was picking her brain for like, okay, well, what's happening and where are things moving? Because she had a lot of visibility into a lot of places in Chicago. And then she said, hey, this might not be interesting, but it might be. And
it might not, but it might be.
And so that was it. 48 hours, signed and resigned, and started my own company.
Now, were there tears on the resignation for that one?
There were not tears at the resignation. There were tears at my last, like as I was leaving. I mean, I was sobbing.
The people you're saying goodbye to, it just,
Yeah.
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 Wow. So, okay. So now you're doing a pop-up museum. Oh my gosh. Again, back to this experiential, but also event. Yeah. Okay. I'm kind of seeing the themes here.
Yeah. But again, it goes all over the place, because so with the museum, we were scheduled to open about 3 months after I started, and we were not ready. And so we had to pull the plug on opening the museum. We had done a press event, and we were scheduled to open 2 days later, and we decided to not open because we were not ready. The museum was not in a place that we could open. And so Brad then also made the decision to let the creative director go. And I then assumed some of the responsibility. We brought in other partners as well, but to handle the creative for the museum as well. So I was in charge of, when I was hired, operationalizing everything, making it all flow and function, as well as the PR and the marketing. So again, management, public relations, marketing. And then to really take on the creative of what are the exhibits and why are we putting them in, and then the piece of what's the flow and how do we do all of this. So that is truly the culmination of my career, because that brings together everything I've ever done, and as well as it's complete management of the P&L. So I'm full circle on, full circle on this P&L. So the museum was incredible. I had a 1-year contract to open the museum, and we moved out of being a pop-up into a permanent cultural institution in Chicago. And about 6 weeks after opening, we were profitable and maintained profitability during my 10 years. So there's a lot that I'm incredibly proud of during running that museum. I moved contractors to employees, and I did our healthcare plans. There's just so many different pieces to all of it. And then, let's see, the contract was ending, and Brad and I had some great conversations, and we differed in opinion, which can often happen from CEO, founder, and builder. And so I wouldn't say happily, that was also tearful, walking away. It was my time. I was the builder, and it was now the baby was birthed and raised, and she was ready to be put into the hands of someone else to keep her growing. And then I took a sabbatical. So this is how we get to Denver. And my sabbatical was traveling. I took about 3 months. Yep, it was about 3 months of time away. And it was while I was on a cycling trip in the beautiful country of Croatia, riding through the Dalmatian coast. And my bike guide looked at me and he said, "I rode up to you today and asked you how you were doing, but you were very deep in thought. So tomorrow, I want you to just go. I will tell you the route, I'll tell you your turns, but I want you to just go ahead of the group. Don't focus on anything other than yourself." And it was on that day that I worked through, anger, sadness, joy, tears. There was a lot in a 20-mile bike ride to come to the realization of, how did I end up in Chicago for almost 13 years at that point, when my life has always been about skiing and cycling. It's always been a huge undercurrent in everything I've done. I didn't get into that too much, but it has been. And so I said, it's time to move. And funnily enough, my 2 cities were Denver and Miami, Florida.
No skiing in Miami.
No, but cycling. And I was flying back to the US, and I was in Miami connecting to the Dominican Republic. And I spent a couple hours at the Miami airport, and I was like, nope, this is not my city. And then flew to Denver about 2 months later and was like, yep, this is my city. And so when I arrived back in the US, I started working with another company that was trying to figure out, should they fold or should they expand? And I helped them expand, and finished that contract on January 28th and moved on February 4th to Denver. And that's what gets us to here in this point in life today. But that how did I make that decision? That I can be more clear about. It was listening, listening to myself and the whispers. I truly believe in the whispers of life. And when they are whispering at you, listen to them, and write them down and try to listen to them before they're beating you over the head.
Yeah. Yeah. Because when you're always so busy, always going, always doing, you don't, the whispers don't come through, right? And then they beat you over the head with a health scare or
right.
some sort of, or maybe a layoff or a fire, something traumatic, right? That you're like, wow, there were signs I wasn't listening. So I love that. Listen to the whispers. Well, Molly, oh my gosh. So what a fascinating story. And again, you've introduced yourself at our book club, and I knew there was so much more there. I just love this. I love diving into this, but I have so many questions. We could keep going, but we do need to start wrapping up. So I have two questions for you as the wrap up. And the first is, when you look back, what do you think has served you best through your career and through your life?
Trusting in and listening to myself. Really believing in knowing that I do have the answer, and I just need to sit quietly enough with myself to allow the answer to come to the surface.
Yeah, that has come out loud and clear, even though you were sitting quietly.
Exactly.
And then any words of wisdom that impacted you besides the tour guide cycling up to you and saying, just go, go.
My mom is a huge influence in my life, and I have a variety of different pieces of, and this is going to tie to another question you're asking me, so I'll try to wrap them together, which is, is there a quote in your life that resonates? And for me, my mom gave me a card when I left JP Morgan and went to open the museum. And the card says, she put on her brave and decided to be amazing. And I have held on to this card for the last 4 years, and I will never let it go. And oftentimes I think of like making it into a t-shirt, because it's absolutely my mantra, and a huge influence from my mom.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And, the thing is, when you were in your 20s, you were doing that, but maybe you didn't realize how brave you were being, but then as we get older, right, things, more data points, more perspective, all these different things. And then, like you said, why you could do things in the 20s is you had no debt. You had no obligations, responsibilities, right? And so now, I don't know, things change over life, right? And then it does seem braver, and you're like, wait a minute, I've been doing brave things all my life. So very cool. Very cool. Well, Molly, thank you so much for sharing your story today. This has been fascinating and so introspective too. There's so much thought and reflection in here, which I think is going to help and inspire a lot of people. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for inviting me to tell the story. It's fun. It's a fun one to tell. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I do think it is a bit indulgent for all of us, right? That we get to spend all this time on ourselves and just telling our story, because it's not often we get to do that and really reflect back on the whys and the hows and how did I get here? So, So listeners, if you enjoyed today's interview, please subscribe below so you'll be alerted when other interviews are published. And if you have any questions for me or for Molly, you can find this interview, and you can find both of us on my website, lifestorycurator.com. So I'll post the interview there, as well as your social media, how you'd like to be contacted, Molly. And I guess on that note, let's just stay safe, stay well, and let's keep sharing those stories. Have a great day.